Got it. Okay, welcome everyone to the Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon if you're on the West Coast Aquarian series. And as most of you know, this is something that is being sponsored by the San Diego Lodge. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. But the actual aquarium series came out of the San Diego Lodge, I believe, if I'm understanding things correctly, as a series of themes and topics to consider throughout the entire year that have to do with spiritual pursuits and perhaps mental postures and positions, as we'll be hearing tonight. As usual, the calendar, I believe most have seen the quotes that have been put forth for tonight's topic. And they are in and of themselves things that should be deeply contemplated. And we'd just like to read a few of them as an introduction to tonight's talk. For the 15th, it says, knowledge is the conformity of the object and the intellect. And it's interesting to think of that word conformity in the ideation of Patanjali's. And then we can have an understanding of what true conformity might be. To know is nothing at all. To know is nothing at all. Think about that. What we think and what we think we know is nothing. To imagine is everything. And then again, that's another occult word, imagine. And to deeply understand what that word imagine means and where it fits in the cosmological picture or topography is very, very important as it relates to the truth. These others, if we meditate, we shall lift ourselves above the dark environment of the brain. And this one seems to go very well with the most characteristic mark of a great mind is to choose some one important object and pursue it for life. So when we get rid of the brain and all of the cognitive garbage that it holds and identify with one particular pursuit, as Judge would say, a lifetime's meditation, then perhaps we're on the right track. And for the final one that we'll read, and as a result of that, perhaps the power that the disciple shall covet is that which shall make him appear as nothing in the eyes of man. Because when that awakening occurs and those powers that can obscure are properly welded by the individual, clearly they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be known. They simply just wish to do their duty in silence for the benefit of the world. And so in introducing that whole process, our talk tonight is going to be on mental posture. And we have a student that will be presenting some ideas in that regards, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers between she and myself. Miss Lisette, you are on.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I have to say that my heart is full of gratitude to have this opportunity with you all tonight, and I'm ready to learn more from you and all your feedback. And here are some ideas. Before I start this presentation or this conversation, better say, I have to say that this conversation has a base in the article entitled Mental Posture that was published by Ragahan Iyer in 1977. And what I am presenting is this student's perspective and how this article was understood And if there is any mistake or any misunderstanding, I had to say that it's this student responsibility. So here I go. Now, okay. Every day, consciously or unconsciously, we are approaching our daily tasks under a certain mental posture. The ways how we interact and the way how we react to life inputs are framed under our own mental state of mind. This is also true when we approach theosophy or any other quest to search for what is real. In other words, for the divine wisdom. In tonight's conversation, we will be addressing this specific spiritual mental posture, the preparation and the steps for the spiritual seeker, and their relationship with the divine wisdom. We also must take into consideration the reasons for such quest. Is our wish to become true servants of all mankind with its immense suffering and of the great master of wisdom with their inexhaustible light? As I mentioned before, this conversation has the base on this article, Mental Posture, which was inspired by Krishna's teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. In order to embrace the path as spiritual seekers, we need to recognize that mental posture possesses two components, both happening in one action. The first one refers to an attitude of mind, and the second one is the sacred trust between Chela and Guru. We must prepare ourselves by a process of purification where we negate the false conceptions of ourselves, which come from the conditions such as the world into which we are born, our heredity, upbringing, the environment, and education that surrounds us. In other words, our own karma. But how could we do this? Using Plato's methods of intense self-questioning and the belief that physical objects are impermanent representations of unchanging ideas. And the ideas alone give true knowledge as they are known by the mind. The spiritual seeker must hold an honest and sometimes, or better say, most of the time, painful dialogue with him or herself. However, the self-questioning process is not enough. The understanding and the application of such questions and the principles in formulating them, it is a process that must be part of a personal and the environmental interaction. This process will not be unusual for a person of meditation. Mr. Ayers highlights that no matter what circumstances a person of meditation could confront, the understanding of the light of wisdom is always going to be present and possible. However, he adds, most beings are not men of meditation because they have never wanted with enough intensity of one-pointed devotion the great teaching in relation to the immortality of the soul. This statement brings us to this question. Then, what makes human beings become a person of meditation? What makes a human being develop or feel and live the one-pointed devotion? Or we can also ask ourselves, are we born as natural persons of meditation? If so, which events create the condition for a change of this spiritual condition? In Ayers' writing, there are two momentos that make a difference of the human being's life and becoming a person of meditation. Both of them have their basis on producing real questions rooted in one's life. The first one is the child state. Children are permanently amazed with their surroundings, especially with nature and the universe. And because of that, they are constantly asking real questions. This is what Maria Montessori called the absorbent mind plane of development, which referred to the mind's capacity to take in information and sensations from the world that surrounds it. Young children are a statement of the mind's awesome ability to absorb. For example, a baby is born without a language and with few skills other than their survival instinct. Children as young as 3 years old are always asking questions, and one answer is not enough. It's never enough. They are those pure seekers where heart and mind are connected while enjoying the quest of self-discovery. But what happened with this inner curiosity, with the trust and the pure joy of questioning? Let's just remember, we live in a world of adults. Only by deeply considering this, which again implies a self-questioning about our values and motives as part of the human race, then and only then, we could reflect about what happened with children. The second stage occurs after experiencing the world discontent for individual situations that we must confront. In other words, the realization of our own karma. To use I's word, and I open quote, to sense this is to ask questions about meaning, rooted in experience, but they only become real when they are rooted in experience of pain. Close the quote. And this process happens in three momentums, I would say. When one's experience of pain is inserted into the pain of humanity, there is universality in the quality of suffering. In the myriad dimensions of experience, and when there is hunger for meaning. Only with these moments are realized, only when the questions come from the heart, when we start to see all others in terms of those fundamental and enduring questions that concern not only an individual, but all human beings. And that questioning becomes a quest, then life is a single question that cannot be answered without meditation upon birth, death, decay, sickness, and error. Then the ceaseless contemplation state becomes a natural path. So the process, how this happens. Our mental posture should resemble the child's mental mind. Our heart must be open and our mind humble. Our heart must be open and our mind humble enough to recognize the divine wisdom. It is a delicate and sublime balance that must and can be achieved. As Mr. Iyer says, divine wisdom can come alive through the manastayasi, the thinking principle irradiated by the Buddhic fire of the divine dialect. But before Buddhi can become one with manas, there is a preliminary formal engagement. The thinking principle sounder its false alliance to the Shauri self or the astral body, and then draws toward the hidden light of the sun, the light of Buddhi, which is fully lit in Buddha. As the voice of the silent state, the path is not an easy one, but the spiritual understanding and the devotion of the paramita, the practice of this great virtue, is a great way to start. When the seeker is ready, they are placed on a preliminary probation that can be received as disciples only after they have contemplated preliminary qualifications, which involve who they are, before that one, a reorientation of their life outlook in relation to 1, who they are, 2, why they were born, 3, their attitude to the moment of death, 4, what they are doing, 5, the nature of the relationship, And 6, which is the most important, whether they are ready to pledge themselves irreversible towards the great thrill that accompanies the light of daring up in the heart, the thrill of compassionate service to the whole of suffering humanity. As the chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, Devotion through Spiritual Knowledge, indicates, wisdom in action. Krishna communicates that the sacred teachings, the secret doctrine, was passed down by him to the Sun Lord, who passed it to his son Manu, and he passed it to the Brotherhood of Mahatma. All is Supreme Spirit, all comes back into one. That which is unchanging, or that which is ever changing, that which is indestructible, though invisible, or that which is both perishable and visible. Krishna adds that the one who knows this truth is fully purified by the fire of knowledge and attains the supreme. A person who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is a true yogi. That one that performs all action for the welfare of humanity, giving up attachment to the fruit of their actions. I want to read a quote here from the Bhagavad Gita, and I open quote. Those who had spiritual discrimination call him wise, whose undertakings are all free from desire, for his actions are consumed in the fire of knowledge. He abandoned the desire to see a reward for his action, is free, contented, and upon nothing depends. And although engaged in action, he really does nothing. He is not solitude. He is not solicitous on result, with mind and body subject and being above enjoyment from objects, doing with the body alone the acts of the body. He does not subject himself to rebirth. He is content with whatever he receives fortuitously. Is free from the influence of the pair of opposites and from envy, the same in success and failure. Even though he acts, he is not bound by the bonds of action. All the actions of such a man who is free from self-interest, who is devoted with heart, set upon spiritual knowledge, and whose acts are sacrifices for the sake of the Supreme, are dissolved and left without effect on him. The Supreme Spirit is the act of offering. The Supreme Spirit is the sacrificial butter offering in the fire, which the Supreme Spirit, and unto the Supreme Spirit to go. He who makes the Supreme Spirit the object of his meditation in performing his action. I close the quote. This state of knowledge from a self-realized soul comes from the sacrifices. There are many sacrifices that could be done, but the sacrifice performed with knowledge is better than only the sacrifice of material nature. In Aya's word, this self-power can be released by any human being. It is possible to take a proper mental posture in relation to that which is spaceless and timeless, dateless and deathless. Man can gain self-knowledge only if he makes his soul gaze center of the one pure light, the light that is free from affection. And to close this reading in this moment, I'm going to close with the quote from the Gita that is at the beginning of Mr. Iyer's article. Seek this wisdom by doing service, by strong search, by question, and by humility. The wise who see the truth will communicate it unto thee. And that is a presentation of Mr. Ayer's article.
Well, thank you very, very much for a clear rendition of mental posture. Clearly, there's a lot that's been given to us for consideration. And we're now just going to do a little bit of a tweak, because what we're going to do is, now that we've heard tonight's talk on mental posture, we would simply like to read the next 4 talks. That's usually done in the beginning. But keep in mind what we've heard, keep in mind what's been shared with us in terms of fitting ourselves for a particular path that ended up with that quote, "Seek this wisdom by doing service, by strong search, by questions, and by humility. The wise who see the truth will communicate it unto thee." And so, with the preparation of our minds, next week, April 22nd, there's the talk on soul education. And we can only imagine that if our minds are properly set, that if our motives, as we've been told, are in the right place, that if we have one particular path that we are following, such as the path that was indicated in the quotes earlier and indicated in tonight's presentation, that the education of our soul, and we'll put that word soul in quotes, will be clear and precise. And after that education, April 29th, there is a talk on the Buddha vow. And that was also made reference to in tonight's talk on mental posture, because it is a position that we take once we are clear, once we are committed to giving up all of the frivolous interferences and obstacles, and are ready to pursue the service and the duty. And then, after we've taken and heard that Buddha vow, we're going to skip May 6th, and we're going to go to May 13th, and that's on Guru Yoga. And obviously, after we've made our vows, as the talk tonight indicated, we will clearly begin to see the teacher that's always been there. And that yoga has a special significance, which we'll leave to May 13th to disclose, whoever the lucky person is for that talk. And then on May 6th, we will be hearing about HPB in terms of her birthday. And that's a fitting one as well, because then we are in the position of an HPB in regards to sacrificing all of our nature in the service of the teachings and the teachers for the benefit of humanity. And then, like HPB, we will read one more quote from the quotes, and that one is by, as most of you know, Davadar K. Mavalankar, and it said, "I am a perfect slave to my masters, and if they order me, I have but to obey." So everything we've heard tonight, everything that's coming up, is interestingly very appropriate. And so I'm sure there may be some questions there, and Ms. Lisette, as well as myself, are ready for those. Kurt, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Eugene. And Lisette, thank you so much for that very beautifully put together explanation of what's in that article. One thing that I missed, however, I only caught 2 of the, I think there were items that you mentioned that are given in the article as being preliminary stages or factors, requirements contemplation of the student, the listener. I think there were 6 of them. The first one had to do with who one was, what was the meaning of one's birth, and so on. Could you go over those again slowly so that we could?
What are you saying?
Basically, he's
I'm
asking.
listening. I'm not sleeping.
Okay. You're not asking a question, Carolyn. Okay. So Lisette, can you handle that? Those 6 bullet points that you mentioned, Kurt is asking for some further discussion on that. Thank you.
Sure.
If you could just read them again, that would be very helpful. Just because I didn't quite catch all of them.
Yep. So I'm going to read the sentence that I had before that. They say, when the seeker is ready, then they are placed on a preliminary probation and can be received as disciples only after they have complete preliminary qualifications, which involve a reorientation of their life outlook in relation to 1, who they are, 2, why they were born, 3, their attitude to the moment of death, 4, what they are doing, 5, the nature of their relationship, and 6, which is the most important, whether they are ready to pledge themselves irreversible towards the great thrill that accompanies. Thank you. The light of daring up in the heart, the thrill of compassionate service to the whole of suffering humanity.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And again, those can be up for discussion, I'm sure. Ms. Laura, sorry.
Thank you, Lisette. It's a wonderful talk, and you brought to the forefront something from the Gita that, you know, is very perplexing for students, and that is we do nothing in, you know, eating and sleeping and acting, and that's just the senses moving naturally. And we wonder, what is it that we are doing? What is it that it is the duty of man through those actions? And how does that relate to the posture, the mental posture?
So go ahead, Soleil, you've got it. Lisette, 2 questions then. And in a nutshell, can you just give the gist of those, the senses and the posture again, Laura?
Well, the Gita points out that the real action of man or Arjuna is not through the senses, but it is through the mind, the posture of the mind. So, as it says in the On Action, the senses and organs are esteemed great, but the thinking self is greater than they. So how do we understand this idea of mental posture and the thinking self?
Oh, okay. When I heard your question, and the first time you said, okay, so what are we doing if that is not an important action? So what are we doing when we are doing or not doing, if you want to say it that way? In my mind, it came these 3 fundamentals that we discuss in every class, that is the evolution of the soul, and then which is the real path. So in our action, which is not an action for that spiritual path, if we might say, this daily life that we have, even though it is an illusion because it's not the real, it gives us the opportunity to obtain that self-consciousness that is needed in order to walk the path of realization. And even though, and in the Gita, Krishna said, I create all these, and it's what we know as Maya. It is an illusion, but it is necessary for this self-realization. So, but then, in order to obtain that self-realization in an illusionary world, we must, through our thinking principle, understand that we had to oversee all that is not real, and in order to achieve that is where the mental posture, this spiritual mental posture that was considered in tonight's article, is necessary. So this article is showing us it is hard, what it needs to be done, how this mental posture starts, which is start with this self-questioning, even though it's not easy. And then the understanding of this questioning, the principle that you apply to make this questioning to the understanding of the world and the environment. And to understand that everything else is in the same path. So to obtain that, I mean, before getting into what is real, we need to develop this mental posture. And yeah.
Follow up on that. Is mental to posture, is that what we call devotion? What we're devoted to? That is, would that be mental posture?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, and it could be everything that allow us or bring us to that state of mind, that spiritual state that is needed for this path. The Gita, all the chapters of the Gita are entitled Devotion to. And this particular article, it is inspired on the chapter 4 of the Gita, Devotion to the Self-Knowledge. But I think also is that mental posture is that meditation that we have, this aware meditation, if I might say that, it is that permanent state of meditation that we have to follow every day, not just sit down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and do that. Mm-hmm. That helps, no? But that sense of awareness that we have to have every day, but understanding that this is not the real. However, we need this to get to the real. And then it also makes me think about the paramitas. So all these mental posture can be named in different ways because all those practices are going to create that mental posture needed in order to advance on the path, if I might say.
Great, thank you. And again, bringing it back to that quote from the 21st, as you've said like 3 or 4 times in your explanation, it's, I guess Judd said he used the term lifetime meditation. And that is that, quote from the 21st, again, the most characteristic mark of a great mind. And, that mental discipline, that mental devotion, that mental purity, living the paramitas brings one to choose that one important object and pursuing it for life, which is, if we would perhaps use HPB's word, the awakening, the total awakening of the monad. And that's an awesome thought to consider, the totality and total awakening of the monad to a self-consciousness such that illusion is recognized to be illusion, but not given up. because, as Lisette shared earlier, we're serving humanity. There's a hand up, James.
Well, I think what I'm saying, just compatible with what Lisette and you have said, Jean, is just the thought that, to Laura's question, that if everything is seen, everything the individual does ideally is a consecration, is an offering or reverence for the divine, then that also includes thought. And it's very interesting, if one has the attitude of reverence for the divine, that's one's posture, one becomes very conscious of what one is thinking, of what one is choosing, of how one is using one's senses. And so one begins to raise questions, as that pointed out, and so is the article, so that you begin to sift and select the trains of thought you permit to go through your mind, the desires and the wishes and the way you use your senses. And we can imagine someone of deep devotion would be a very high being, because they would have everything would be a kind of consecration. And everything that they did would be an expression ultimately of the divine, because in a sense, the consecration to the divine is the language of the divine. That's the communication with the divine. That's the language of the gods. They are the greatest in devotion before the absolute, before the light of the Logos. So everything about the greatest beings is they are the greatest chelas to the divine. They are ultimately those who represent the possibility of perpetual learning.
Great. Thank you very much for the addition. And we might cap that with just the statement that that is a true path of desirelessness. A couple of months ago, we had that discussion about desire, and yet it's not empty desire, but it's simply a real visual understanding of how the law of karma works and how to work best with that law. There is nothing to wish for. There is only clarity of sight and understanding, and as James shared with us, that logoic desire to bring everything back home. And that is not a desire that the multitude of the people would be looking for nowadays. Yes, Monica, your hand's up.
Thank you. Lizeth, I just wanted to say thank you. This was such a beautiful presentation on this article. And what really stuck out for me was at the very outset that you spoke of what is it that makes a person want to meditate? And you put forth these two ideas, one of returning to the childlike state, where even before language, the child is absorbing everything spoken and not spoken around them. And I thought that was beautiful. And the other idea being that of discontentment, of recognizing that the world is basically in a state of discontentment, the suffering that we're all under in one form or another. And so it just occurred to me that these two things, before we can even properly, as the word posture comes up, properly receive what the guru or the master, within or without, I guess, has to give us, is to engage in these two things as a spiritual practice, to put ourselves within earshot, for lack of a better way to put it. So these two things really stuck out for me, for a person just starting out and wanting to be on this path. So thank you.
Okay, so now let's then follow up on Monica's thankfulness towards you, and let's just ask, and I don't know if there's a correct answer, but what might, Lisette, a childlike state be in the realm of theosophy?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Monica was saying because the child has the perfect mental posture that we as an adult want to achieve, as long as we respect the child for how it is. We adults are permanently wanted to transfer all these illusions that we have been living in to these kids. And that's why they show so much resistance. And because they are fighting against that. But of course, they might not have the words to express that that's exactly what they are fighting against too. So it is important to understand that this state of the absorbent mind only happens in a child from 0 to 6 years old, almost to 7, which also make us, we have to think about when the karma comes into the life of that child. But precisely during the 0 to 6, where that period of wonder, that period of just happiness or being, and just that joy of learning, and also that propensity of helping and self-discovering. But we also have to remember that kids at that age, while they like to please, because they want to feel part of the community that they belong to. Mm-hmm. So if we think about all those attributes that a child has, if we stop and really consider it the way, without wanting to add more or new, then we understand that these children are in the perfect mental posture. And it is a sense of joy, most of them, I have to say.
Thank you. I just one little more thing. That was what was most appealing to me, because say in the presence of a great teacher or a guru or or a master, you know, I don't know what it takes to put the ego aside, or the idea of how you should be. So many different things the ego wants to engage in instead of just being. And so this particular point to me was important to just.
There's something for children that I love, and every day they say, today is the best day of my life. Yes. Every day, most of them will say, today is the best day of my life. It's because they are living with intensity, and everything that they are self-discovering, it just adds that joy. I just wonder if, well, when I was reading this article, I was thinking that this should be our posture regarding our masters.
Yes.
This state of wonder, and just one question brings another question, and this never ends. I mean, you can sit down with a child and it's going to have all the whys, because it needs to know. And there, the sense of wonder is always there. And another question brings another. I mean, that sense of wonder just gets intensified. So if we keep that sense of wonder of what we have ahead of us, I mean, where we are coming from, like where are we going to, then I think it will definitely have the right posture for adults. Yeah.
Thank you. And again, if I can try to tie together all three of those, your statement, the question, and then the comments again, just in terms of that childlike state, like you said, that child is coming into a community. And so perhaps as Monica suggested, when the ego is literally reduced to a clear point that is no longer obstructing, and that childlike state is there, the chela or the disciple wakes up to that community that you're talking about and has nothing but questions. And that mind is so pure and so innocent that it is just ready to continue. And then we can understand, again, I'll read it. Damodar's comment. I am a perfect slave to my masters, and if they order me, I have but to obey. And that is not a sense of loss of will, because the teachers indicate that they would never, ever usurp an individual's will. That's not what it's about. But that love, and going back to Laura's comment, that devotion and those paramitas coming into that community of brothers and sisters in the terms of adepts and masters, that's, just an awesome encounter. So, that childlike state is definitely something that we should all be seeking in some life or way. Desiree, your hand is up.
Trying to unmute myself. I just got back from a 1-year-old's birthday party, so I've been around a lot of the subject matter here. And again, love children and live through them. I was just thinking about this idea of justice that we seem to be taught, these ideas of love that we're taught, but a child knows these ideas internally without syntax, without being taught. And it's a sense, a very, very strong and so natural of a sense of the world that they have, that I wonder sometimes if not the child in us is our first guru. Because in remembering, simply remembering dreams and just experiences as being a child, a young child, I can remember just how colorful and bright everything was. You're almost in that state, that almost like a devaconic state. And in that state, you're so close to that Buddhic principle that you don't even see the difference. You wouldn't stop and say, I'm devoting myself, because it's a state. You're too intertwined in it. There's no separation to say, I am devoting myself to you. So there's that state of mind where everything happens at once and there is no separation. And I think young children have an unspoken awareness of this. Just wanted to slip that in.
Thank you. Any comments on that, Lisette?
Yep. Children are just that amazing, if we can call it miracle, that help us to remember precisely that state of love, of wonder, and self-discovery. If we stop and think, and then we try to make an analogy with the spiritual seeker, these children come with very few physical skills. But as it was mentioned, but they learn to talk without somebody sitting down and saying, this is how you move. It's you just talking. And then that child is going to have, later on, a few months later, that need of movement, of independence. So, but what is doing that child is aware that it wants to be part of that community. And nobody's sitting down and say, you have to be part of this community, you have to do this and this. That child, especially when it's a baby, is seeing everything that is happening. And the purity of their mind is so delicate that if we really sit down and consider this with the responsibility that this brings to us, then we can understand how sacred their life is. And they have all the keys to open all that path that it needs to be walked. And then they become our own masters too. Because when we stop and to see that child and we observe that child this way, then we understand that our state needs to be that way. But as I mentioned in the article, we live in a world of adults, and unfortunately, we lose that inner capacity or that spontaneity way, or that spontaneous way, how we connect with what is the divine, with what is the real, the spiritual thought. And then the other part comes, and is when we had to do all of this self-questioning, and we starting to suffer, of course, because we understand that the world is.
Thanks again. But let's just for the fun of it, let's complicate the picture. We're talking about kids, and let's just bring in a theosophical idea that was mentioned, that really the incarnating ego from the monastic side is present by the age of 7. Mm-hmm. And then Judge tells us in the ocean that typically from birth till, let's say, even if it comes in a little early, 5.5, 6, that's typically racial karma. Mm-hmm. And then we've got this part that Desiree brought in that's just full of love. Mm-hmm. But it's not the incarnating ego. And so the technical question would be, what's going on? And then we can complicate it further by bringing up the fact, like you said, Lisette, this beautiful child comes into the world of adults. And excuse my expression, we're screwed up. We beat children, we starve children, we rape children, we neglect children, we beat children. You know that. I deal with it every day. Mm-hmm. And yet there can still be, even with all of that abuse, a piece of them that loves mm-hmm. the perpetrators that are doing all of this nonsense to them. And yet the mind still hasn't come in yet. And then the mind comes in and they're 10 years old and they're struggling like a wombat to love, to hate, to get rid of what's going on there without just saying it's karma. So that's the technical question. Let's muddy the waters. I know it's a lot.
Yeah. Without saying that it's karma. Oh, that one is a tough one. But when the child is turning 6 or 7, in most of our societies, we're starting to see that child more as an independent individual, and becomes is more self-sufficient to do more things, and then, of course, is already at school, which is another key point here. Then that child enters in what is the daily days of the adult. The adult might not be as patient as it was before, just for the child to wait to put their shoes on in the morning. We just in a rush all the time. So that child gets into that daily life that the adult have. And then, and of course, 9-10 years old, they started to rebel because that is not something that they want to. They have been dragged there because of their innocence, because of their trust to the adults that are around them, and because they trust that what they are telling them, it is the correct thing to do, it's the right thing to do. But it's something that is awakening inside, or is awake, that is say, wait a minute. So, and that's what they need to be. I mean, when they become teenagers, then they have that strong voice that it say, "Don't tell me what to do. I know what to do." So they think that they know. Of course, they know, but they think that they know more than the adults that are surrounding them. No, and it is a battle. If an internal battle that these kiddos have, and Maria Montessori indicated that that the adulthood age doesn't come at the age of 21. There are some certain areas of the brain that will function better as we expect in the world of adults once when we are 25. So if we stop and think about it, what we are expecting for these kids from 7 and on until they 18, especially here, that they leave home, then it is our responsibility. And we are not just transferring, without talking about the karma that they have, because that, as you said, to leave that out of the equation, but we are dragging these kids to the life of adults. We are dragging them to our own life because we do not stop to listen and to enjoy that time that they have. And I think as a society, all as a society, do that until the child are 7. In Asia, in South America, families live with the kids until they're 7. They protect the kids, and you can see here, parents are willing to pay anything that they can in order to keep their kids in art, sports, and everything. But once when the child starting to have a voice, most of the society goes just back, and it drags them to a world of adults that it is not their world.
Okay, thank you. And then we've, again, I love to flirt with the negative side, because then we have those children that by age 3 or 4 are so in appearance negative, obstructive, as you said, not just voicing their own I-ness, but defiant.
Mm-hmm.
And they are abusive to the parents.
Mm-hmm.
A 4-year-old beating up on a mother or a grandmother. And you can see it today. I'm sure all of you have had examples over video games, trying to take away stupid video games because the kid wants to play, the articles in the news. And so these are, the love is there, but, these karmic forces are strong. And again, as someone on the path, obviously, they don't get less, they become typically more intense. But we've got Monica and then Kurt and Jonathan. Tell us what we've got in terms of time, please, because I've got 3 hands up.
You've got another 16 minutes, but you can
16.
go a little further if you want.
Okay, 3, 6, 9. Go ahead, Monica, then Kurt, and then Laura.
Thank you. I just had this one question that occurred to me while Lizeth was explaining this. Actually, both of you through the professional aspect of yourselves, which I really appreciate. And so I was wondering, when you were talking about these children who were going through horrific experiences with adults and still managed to love them, could we say that this love in them was coming from a higher place? Was it coming from Atma Buddhi, that that part of our being that is unconditional and, if any qualities at all, compassionate in that way, or some mix of that and the karma? I was just wondering about that.
Thoughts, Lisette?
Agree with you, Monica. That love is pure love. Is that unconditional love that is not expecting anything in return. It is just because it's the love that I have. But kids feel when they are not loved the way how they feel love. I mean, they can sense that, and then when you have these little kids rebelling because they know that love that they have is not being reciprocated, and because it is an unconditional love, it doesn't understand why it is not pure as the love that they feel. And then this brilliant mind starting to, we call it brilliant mind, but at that time it's not the manasic, I mean the manas part, but that sense is so strong that all the other senses react to that. So and I think we all can relate that we might have some experiences that happened when we were kids, something, but they do not they don't internalize those experiences, because for them, it cannot be, they cannot judge what is happening because they don't know that kind of feeling or that kind of action, of that kind of intention. I think that's the right word here. Mm-hmm. So they cannot judge the situation that way because those thoughts are not in their mind. It's just when they are older enough that the mind aspect it's working so hard, especially this lower mind, that then they realize that those intentions and in any moment of something that happened to them were that type of intention. So but they cannot judge it at that moment because the love is so pure that there is doesn't have this if what if oh this is it, you know. So you can see it when a baby is born and the way how the baby see her or his mom.
And so let me throw another little wrench in, because you know my job then in some of these interviews is to figure out what's really love, what's simple attachment, what's simple routine and expectation based on dependency. Mm-hmm. And all of those can masquerade as love. And so it's just an interesting world to be in. And some of the life experiences themselves that tease that out, you know, if we had more time, we could always talk about. But again, just something to keep in mind, especially in light of theosophical principles at work. I think Kurt and then Laura. You're muted, Kurt.
Yes, thank you both. Very engaging discussion. I appreciate the way you're probing into this issue. It's such a painful one for all of us. I'm just going to a few tidbits, a few thoughts to go along with all that. Of course, one of the things that comes to mind as we talk about, the issues of the abuse of children and all the you could say the difficulty of being a good parent is how important the understanding of karma and reincarnation is as a fundamental basis for perceiving life, perceiving other human beings, perceiving our role in relation to other human beings. And one of the things that Professor Iyer mentions in another article is that, a person who is abusive towards children or finds a kind of an indifference towards children is really showing a self-destructive tendency, right? They're showing they're not living on behalf of the future. They're not living on behalf of their own true benefit even. It's a self-destructive tendency because the child represents their future and their future incarnations. The way they treat their child, that's the way they will be treated in future incarnations, right? That's a fundamental, we have to accept that as a fundamental fact of karma. But the other thing that I gain a lot of hope and you could say comfort from is a point that George William Russell, the Irish theosophist, makes very beautifully in his writings, and which is also mentioned in the aphorisms on karma, that we're all old souls, very old souls, incarnated thousands of times since the awakening of the human mind. We all have this vast collection of hidden karma. The child is bringing that with them into incarnation. And we cannot judge from the outside whether or not a particular person who is in conditions of suffering, and you could say degradation, a child going through an experience like you've been talking about, may be one who has deliberately chosen to experience that kind of abuse, that kind of suffering, those kinds of issues deeply, to experience it themselves. And we know that all of us, that a person who can best help an alcoholic, for example, is someone who's been through alcoholism, right? Someone who has been through a particular disease of the mind often has an insight that no one else can match in terms of trying to help someone else who is going through that issue, right? So that the soul and in the aphorisms it says that souls will choose conditions of suffering in order to gain sympathy and understanding, right? So, and Russell makes this point. He says that even those who have seemed to have fallen the furthest, whether they're the perpetrator or the receiver of the abuse or suffering, both of those are fallen conditions in one sense, but they may seem from the outside to be fallen conditions. They may also be that soul going through that experience in order to gain an understanding of it. And that will, in future incarnations, make them better servants of humanity. So just a thought there to add to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And clearly, I mean, we can see that even in everyday life, when individuals that have been abused, that have undergone trauma, turn their lives around, and instead of becoming bitter, they actually take on the role of those that help, the wounded healer, so it's called. And then just tonight's title, Mental Posture, from the reincarnation point of view, supports your idea that there are certain souls that will simply walk into those situations. And they're walking into those situations to help the others, at the expense of what the appearance to them is. So, again, it just opens up a whole world of points of view on what karma looks like versus what karma is. But then, Laura, you've got a question, and I'll give that one to Lisette.
Yes,
Or
just
a
thinking
comment?
in terms of what it says in the Voice of the Silence, that we must be able to slay the lunar form at will. And it seems that children that survive such terrible conditions when they're young are children who have maybe previous incarnations slain that lunar form. And so instead of feeling, taking their identity from the conditions that they find themselves in, they recognize and discern an inner identity that is not dependent on the condition. And that seems to help to get them through. And they usually have a feeling of compassion, a strong feeling of, when I grow up, I'm not going to do that. And an inner knowing. And as they are an absorbent mind, what they then do, and this is rather interesting, is they look around for people that exemplify what they know in their own heart. And what's interesting is when they grow up, sometimes they recognize that, oh, it wasn't the other person, it was my own self that had that knowledge. And but yet we project that inner knowledge out to somebody else and then grow up and realize it was ours all along, which is interesting. But I think that, is that possible that children can incarnate with that lunar form already conquered and under control?
Lisette, thoughts?
It is possible, but at the same time, I think these children, and yes, we cannot judge the karma and the conditions that they are coming to. It's true. But what we can see is that when you have a baby, you hold a baby, and it's so innocent, so full of life, but at the same time, it needs so much from you. Then it is, I would say, one of the most important opportunities and gifts that humankind has to realize at that moment what unconditional love is, what real sacrifice is, and what the miracle of life is. So every child, it doesn't matter what is coming after, because we cannot judge that. But what we can see is that golden opportunity that each child brings to the world just for the realization of that. If humanity just stop and understand that, but not just in the understanding, but the internalize that fact, then the respect of life and the sacrifice that is always called for the mental posture, it is there. So it is one of those other devotions that we can find in order to gain our mental posture. So and then of course we have to ask ourselves, we get more into what really love is and how much I'm going to give and all that. That comes after. But when a baby is born, that is a golden opportunity that I think if we stop, respect, and recognize that, then all the conditions that will come after for that soul will manifest. Maybe if it's in in some of the suffering that it will happen, but with always having love as a base, if that could be understood like that. It's just a thought. I mean, a baby, it's a child, is a reminder of that hope that humanity has to evolve and to go back to that pure sense of love and what is real. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And you know, I mean, again, it seems like we're talking about kids more than mental posture, but mental posture is the kid. and in an interesting example, perhaps, of slaying that lunar form for the kids. And we've all seen these examples of these kids with certain neuroblastomas that come when they're 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, and they've gotten cancer, etc. And yet when you hear them talk and you hear how they have accepted their condition, it's as though something inside knows that the astral lunar self is just carrying more karma that they're getting rid of, and it's okay. And they talk like old souls. And you can just see the wisdom coming through them. So there is, you know, even from just a regular profane reincarnating karmic perspective, such a thing as slaying that lunar form in terms of the way it affects the cognitive monastic process. Jonathan, your hand was up, or are you telling us we're done?
No, I was thinking about asking another question, but yeah, the time is up. But well, I'll just tell you what the question was. You can decide if you want to deal with it.
Lisette will deal with it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just noticing that one of the quotes in the almanac for this week is from Judge, and he says, "Duty persistently followed is the highest yoga." Why do you think that would be?
You're muted, Lisette. Don't. It's that's the 19th.
Yeah, and then
Yep.
19th.
Yep.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what your duty is, because that will depend on your karma, isn't it? So it doesn't matter what your duty is. If you do it the way how it is to be done, the right way, following the highest moral and ethic practices, and having that understanding from the heart that it needs to be done, then each of us will be doing our highest yoga. It doesn't matter in what conditions the life put you, because our duty is service to humanity. And when we understand that when we work, what we're doing is a service. And when we are with our family, with our friends, when we are driving, our duty is to do the things that are right. If we do it that way persistently, then we gain the highest yoga. I don't know, Jean, you might have something.
No. I don't want to run my mouth, but thank you. I mean, you know, literally doing what's in front of us, as you say. You know, when we do our duty correctly, and the only thing that we would throw in there was that little comment that Monica made, without the ego. Then everything gets done and unfolds, and there's nothing personal. There's only the work to do. And then Desiree has her hand up, and so I'll give it back to you, Lisette.
Just quickly, so the compassion that a mother feels towards, or a parent feels towards their child while they're embracing it and thinking about their future and rooting. This is what we should feel for all humanity. So that, we'll call it love or compassion. It's sort of a word sort of an experience. It's hard to put a word onto it, but that has to somehow expand as the mind also expands. So you're letting light in and you're opening that light heart is at the same time, it would seem.
There is a popular expression in Spanish that it says, once when you become a mom, or when you become a mother, all the children of the streets are yours. Yep. Because there is a love that comes here that it grows. I mean, unless it's not unconditional love. And then when I moved to the US, I found out that there is an expression which I love regarding to children that is it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. And that's precisely that notion that you are sharing here. Because the child brings all that. The child is just perfect. It's the perfection that we, as a human beings, that we're looking to obtain. And they are our masters. And they teach us all that unconditional love. So if we are capable of feeling this love that we feel from our own child or our related to the other ones, then that love, you are feeling love for the humanity, because that's the future of humanity.
Great, thank you. And so we'll actually end on this note, because both of you brought up the statements in the SD to my mind about that question: how many souls do you see, Lanu? And the Lanu says, I see one life, one spark in many different karmic vessels. And that which every mother and father and brother and sister see in the first moment of life is perhaps that spark with no identity, no differentiation, no culture, no biased thoughts, no abuse, just that pure, as you're saying, light of compassion that makes us all melt for the moment. And then we lose our minds again. but thank you all, and I will give this back to Jonathan. Jonathan, you're going to wrap it up, or just, again, everybody's heard the talks coming up, so
it was a beautiful meeting. Barbara Aber from the Theosophical Society will be presenting next week, so she cares about this stuff as much as anybody does. So anyway, thank you all very much. Beautiful meeting, I thought.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisette. Great job. Appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You guys take care. Thanks for the question.
Be well and safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
You got it. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good night.